Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a reflection on Daoism. And I've just enjoyed Daoism so much, in part because I'm the worst Taoist ever. And I thought it would be a good time to revisit this for a number of reasons. One, to remind myself of the kind of thinking and living, mistakes I tend to make and I see being made around me based on the kind of cultural tradition that I come from. And two, because I just read Marcus Leroy's Finding Your Way in Daoism. Let's see, it's got a subtitle, A Comprehensive Guide to an Enlightening Philosophy. And I found this to be a very pleasing, accessible, yet rigorous introduction to Daoism. So if anybody's interested in that, or I don't know if introduction is the right word, perhaps reflection on would be better, sort of review and reflection on. So if anybody's interested in the subject of Daoism, I think it's an excellent, short, insightful, and like I said, I think quite resonant reflection on Daoism and what it means and how it works in theory. And it got me thinking on what is the real fundamental difference between what we experience in the West, how we're raised in the West, particularly my experience being with the United States, maybe the most extreme version of these kinds of backgrounds, versus the sort of what Daoism is emphasizing and teaching. And what I came around to is that at the center of Daoism is the notion that life is beautiful and joyful and health-giving. And if we live in harmony with life, which of course the Tao, if we live in harmony with the Tao, the power of the universe, of the life force of the universe, then your life will be joyful, peaceful, healthful, and long. By the way, Taoism has a big emphasis on longevity of life, that if you're living well and living correctly, you will live for a long time. Indeed, in the more esoteric Taoist traditions, the goal is, and the possibility is, that you'll live forever, like you'll become immortal. So because the Tao is immortal, the universe is immortal, then when you live in perfect harmony with it, then you would in fact be immortal. But this is generally deployed more as a metaphor in more traditional Taoism, simply to say you'll have a long, healthful, pleasant, beautiful, and joy-filled life. And all of those are great. But when you think of the universe as being, that's the default condition, this changes a lot about how you perceive the world. So first, it gives you a marker. And the marker is, if your life is not healthy, peaceful, joy-filled, and sort of harmonious, then you know you're living wrong. You know whatever it is you're doing it incorrectly, because this is the state of being that is, correct is not the right word, that just is, right? Like this is the isness of the universe. And when you live in harmony with it, that's how you know. And I was pondering on this because I saw a recent survey. Another reason for this lecture was I saw a recent survey where they said 85% of American adults have as their number one complaint, 85%, by the way, shockingly high number, is stress and anxiety. And it just popped into my head, probably because I had recently read the Marcus Leroy book, that, that is the counterexample to Taoism. Because what Taoism says, if you're feeling stress and anxiety, you're doing it incorrectly. And in theory, in the United States or other places in the West, you would say, of course, like this is, people know this. But in fact, if you just peel back the onion the slightest little bit, what you find is, no, this isn't what they say at all. For instance, if you say you grind and you work and you drink a lot of coffee and you stay up all night and you get promoted, then you're doing it right because you got the promotion. Despite the fact that you're exhausted, you don't feel well, you feel stressed, and you felt anxiety about it. See, Taoism reverses that and says, if you're feeling stressed and you're feeling like you're in a grind and you're having to stay up all night and you don't feel healthy, then you're doing it wrong. The promotion is not proof that you're succeeding. It's simply proof that you're pursuing the wrong goals, right? Like, oh, look, you made yourself sick to get a goal. That means that goal is the wrong goal by definition. It also means that Taoism puts a high emphasis on not interfering with things. That because if you think of the world's native state as being one of bounty and joy and peacefulness, then it's by not interfering, by not doing things, by avoiding trouble, that you achieve that, because that's just always there. And so it's when we do things incorrectly, or we're too active or too driven or too something, that we lose track of it. Whereas I would say in the Western tradition, or in the Western tradition, in a grand sense, you have the notion that the world is fallen and damned, and man is damaged and sinful and awful in general, and therefore you have to do things, you have to be active, you have to pursue goals to try to escape the native state of the world, which is fallen and awful. You see this articulated in notions like it's a dog-eat-dog world. You go out there and it's a fight, it's a struggle, it's war. A man has got to go out and earn and work and grind out a living for his family. Like these kinds of narratives that you just see everywhere. Taoism says, no, you've just misunderstood the world completely. The world is bountiful and joyful and harmonious. And if you're not feeling that way, you don't need to do things, you need to not do things. You've almost certainly created some obstruction or some barrier or some problem that's keeping you from it, rather than the other way around. And so if you conceptualize, again, the native state of the world as being a want, of being poor, as being without resources, as being dangerous, then sure, you're going to feel stress. Sure, you're going to feel anxiety. Sure, you're going to feel unsure of yourself. And then you convince yourself like, oh, to overcome all of that, what I need to do is X, Y, and Z. That if I get the promotion, if I make more money, if I get more friends, if I become more famous, if I move to a better place, like all of these things, all of this activity, all of this waving your arms about in the world will get you where you want to be. But as long as you're carrying a conception of what, as Taoism would argue, a misconception of the world as being something you're working against, then you're doomed. The Taoism just says you're doomed. And if you see a survey, like you can look around and see different ones, but it seems pretty consistent. I looked at a couple that somewhere between 80 and 90, so call it 85% of American adults say they're stressed and feel anxiety. And think about what an achievement that is, to be the wealthiest society the world has ever known. And even if you go, 40% of the population is living, at the lower end of the demographic or the economic spectrum, they're living paycheck to paycheck. Okay, well, what about the other 60% or 50%? Notice by the time you get to 80 to 90%, you're talking about people that a lot of that 80 to 90% is making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, have millions of dollars in assets, have retirement accounts, savings accounts. Theoretically, they've solved the problem, but they're still feeling anxious and stressed, which Taoism would say, see, you haven't solved the problem because you're carrying the problem with you in your own mind because you've misconceptualized the world. And so that, it seems simple. You articulate it simply. Just reconceptualize your understanding of the universe. So do that before lunch today, and then you'll be good to go. But of course, this is a slightly more challenging than that. And so what happens with Taoism is once you understand that they're just coming at the universe from just this totally different perspective, then many of the elements that you'll read about and encounter make a lot more sense. So I always said, okay, so that's the biggest difference, number one. And I think the most profound one is simply this totally different conceptualization of the universe. And so then you have all these things follow from there. One is that Taoism says there is no answer. In fact, answers are a problem. One of the problems we face is the desire for answers, because there's people are variable. The universe is variable, right? Like different people come in many different kinds, shapes, and sizes, different desires, different likes, different dislikes, and they're in different conditions or in different countries, different cities, live in, have money, don't have money. And so the notion that there is an answer for the fact that you have a whole wide range of people living in a wide range of circumstances is itself one of the problems. So there is no answer per se. And then it adds to this notion, which again is reflected from looking at the universe, looking at the natural world. Daoism always wants us to look at the natural world. And it says one of the things you see in the natural world is endless variation and endless change. So you see the seasons are changing, the environment is changing, the temperature is changing, the animals, that the migration of the birds bring in new life, and then it goes away. Change, change, change. So on one hand, you have this notion of variability, high variability of condition, high variability of people within those conditions, and then you add on that those people and those conditions are themselves continuously changing. And so the notion of imposing answers on top of that to the Taoist thinkers just seems absurd. Like, well, clearly you can't have an answer that is in the form of an answer, right? And so this is why the great opening of the Tao Te Ching, which I believe historically was actually the second book, but now we have it as the first book. But so potentially that's just how we've received it. But it's a great line nonetheless, wherever it occurred, which is the path that is a path is no path. Right? The name that can be named is not the true name. So this is this notion of if someone says, "Oh, this is the way," you can be pretty sure that's almost certainly not the way, because if it were the way, it wouldn't be named the way, right? And this is where it kind of gets like people go, "Oh, this is very mystical and very difficult to understand." But what it articulates, and when it articulates in context, is simply the notion of, oh, when you start asking for answers, now you're already done. It's not a question of an answer that takes care of things forever. It is the notion of it's usually invoked as a dance. It's a harmony. It's a creating processes that change with the environment. It changes around you, and being open and flexible and dynamic. And it's a dance, not a conclusion. And it's a flowing of water, not an end, not an answer. And so I was just trying to think of concrete versions of that. And it's they used to say in college, like, oh, get a degree in programming, and then you know what to do, and then life is good, and you've solved the problem. Of course, it solves zero problems, in case anybody was wondering. But what this doesn't take account of, and didn't take account of, is one that lots of people have no interest in, no skills in, and no desire to program. And it's one of the most commonly left career paths. So if you look at statistics, a lot of people who got their degrees in computer programming or computer engineering, computer science, these sorts of things, would immediately get a job in that field, with huge demand, and then within 2 years they had left the field, which tells you, right, like they functionally didn't ever want to be there to begin with, and so it wasn't a good answer. And now, hey presto, fast forward a few years, and now AI is around, and it looks like one of the things that artificial intelligence might be good at. We don't know yet, but it looks like it's moving in that direction. It just might be computer programming. Like, this might be the thing it's best suited for. And if that's the case, then, well, now we don't need computer programmers. And so what looked like an answer and never was to begin with is now certainly not an answer, because one, the variability of people is so high, and two, the variability of the world is so high that this change, and then people, this change means that, you can't be vested in that answer. The people who are promoting that answer will say, well, of course we couldn't see this coming. And it's like, of course, but that's the whole, right? You never can. Right? That's what Taoism is trying to say. Sometimes the frost comes early, sometimes the frost comes late, sometimes spring is really dry, and sometimes it's really wet. You don't see it coming. And so you don't have an answer. Because if you have an answer, that means you've solved it. And if you've solved it, then the dance stops. If the harmony and the dance and the flow stops, you're not the universe. Because we look around and what we see is this, we see this continuing movement. We see continuing change. We see continuing evolution. What we don't ever see is stop. And so that can't be an answer, right? So the answer that is the answer is no answer. The name that is the true name, the name that is named is not the true name. The path that is the path is no path. And so when you think of it in that context, I think it becomes much clearer that so much of the trouble that we create for ourselves and we create in our lives and our world is we want to say this is the conclusion. Now I'm done. I can wash my hands with it and I can move on. And, sometimes maybe, but often, we don't, the conclusions, be careful, like answers, be careful. That's one of the messages of Daoism. A second one, and this one is particularly challenging for the Western mind, and in some ways the modern mind, because the modern mind is predicated on materialism, and so much of our material culture is promoted by advertising, that you start going, oh, wow, right. Everything we see all the time in almost every way is being promoted to us. And it's being promoted for our consumption. And that notion of add, more, better, that never ends. It's never enough. You're never done. It's never finished. Having just said, things don't stop. That's really promoted in this sense is you're always going to need more. You're always going to need better. You're always going to need the next thing. And Daoism, by the nature of its theory of the universe being bountiful and good, and joy-giving and health-giving always leans, it's not the answer again, but its bias, its heavy lean is towards not doing that. When you have a problem in Daoism, when you've identified something from a Daoist perspective, the first thing it's always going to ask is, what can you stop doing? What can you eliminate? What can you not do? What can you not have that will help you address this? Because it's probably the material things, it's probably the things you're doing that are interfering with your native condition, which is this world of bounty. And so you don't ask what you can do, you ask what you cannot do, right? Like in that, you don't ask what you can buy, you ask what can you stop spending money on and or what can you get rid of. And I give this, here's an interesting assignment for you. If you just make a note to yourself is every time you have a desire to buy something or to think about something or to consume something, ask yourself is this something that I could achieve, or the outcome that I'm shooting for could be achieved not through consumption but through not consuming, not through buying something but by not buying something, or again even eliminating something. So if you're hungry, eating seems good, right? So that's not you're like, oh, okay, eat some food. But if at some point you're like, or maybe it's easier for my life, it makes my life less stressful if I just eat a lot less, right? Maybe that will help me. Am I really hungry? Or am I just trying to use food to cover some other anxieties or stress or problems that I might have? And you go, oh, maybe if I try. So I think this is one of the things I'm always suspicious of diets and everything, because the U.S. obsession with diets. And I think this is part of what the intermittent fasting people have sort of inadvertently latched onto, is the notion of, oh, we're a food-obsessed culture. There's no clinical evidence, there's no health evidence that you need to eat 3 meals a day with some snacks in between. This is clearly a social pattern that was evolved largely through marketing and through different cultural forces that have nothing to do with us. And so it's not so much that, taking a break from eating or all this fasting stuff, again, of which I'm very suspicious, because again, I'm suspicious of all diets just because we love them so much. That makes me suspicious of them. But is the notion of, are we eating because we want to and we need to and it's going to be health giving? Or are we just sort of acting out this problem, this process that's feeding other anxieties and trying to deal with other things that might be better addressed by not eating? This is, but maybe you've just worked a whole bunch and you haven't eaten for a long time and you're hungry, then eating is a good idea, right? Like sure, knock yourself out. But on the other hand, it's like, am I eating breakfast because breakfast is a thing. There's one thing I've discovered since moving to France where breakfast, they don't even have a word for breakfast, by the way, which will let you know how they think about breakfast. They have a word called petit déjeuner, which just means little lunch. So, but when they say petit déjeuner, what they mean is an espresso and a croissant. It's like, if you want more breakfast than a croissant and an espresso, you're in trouble in France, right? Because they're just like, what are people doing? Why are you doing this? And now that I'm in a culture that doesn't eat breakfast, I have a croissant and a cafe for breakfast. I just don't eat breakfast, right? Like I just stopped eating it, not through any intermittent fasting. It was just, now it's not expected, now it's not there. And then I can realize retroactively, I was just doing this from habituation. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes it'd be like, we have to get breakfast. Where are we going to get breakfast? It's hard to find breakfast. Like, is there a good breakfast? And so had actually been creating problems and stress and expense and probably ill health at some level because now you're just eating more than you need to than is health giving. That's, sort of, you go, that was just a habit. Like this was just a habit, that not in a big way, but just in a small way. And so we just, even at these most basic level, like food, where you think, we've got this worked out. It's like, maybe ponder a bit. But in any case, whatever it is, this notion of less, eliminate and stop as opposed to more is a big change. It's it just fundamentally alters our outlook. So another example is that I encountered recently. I read an article on people are starting to turn off Spotify and the other streaming services, and they're going back to hard media like records and cassettes and CDs and apparently even 8 tracks, which really does seem insane. And what they're saying is, wow, I have way less music, but I'm enjoying it and vastly more, right? I feel like I have a much more meaningful connection because I've gotten rid of, statistically 99.999% of the music, because if I only have 50 albums, but before I had access to, the entire world's recorded history practically, then you're just going, wow, that is a just giant reduction, like extraordinarily large. But what people are reporting and commenting on is like the connection they have with the music they do have is so much richer, so much fuller, so much more engaging that they feel like they love music again and that they're engaging in music in a way they hadn't in the past. So on one hand, notice there is an additional component of this. Like they are adding things. They are adding, vinyl, or they're adding a CD player. Right. So, okay, that is an addition, but they're also subtracting a lot. They're like taking a bunch away. And functionally what they've done is removed access to almost everything. And you would think if you tell somebody like, hey, would you rather have access to 20 things or everything in the world? People are going to go, I want everything in the world. And that might be the wrong answer. Right? It might be that a dynamic, interactive process that builds relationships over time with music is vastly more satisfying than one that is like, I've got everything all the time. Isn't that great? And it seems like it would be great, but it turns out that it might not be that great, right? For some people, in some ways, it's not that great. And so when Daoism talks about not doing less, having less, stopping, eliminating, it's, again, because from the Western tradition, it's like, this is, starvation or fasting or don't consume or all these other things. See, Taoism is always like, yeah, well, not so much. Like, let's not get carried away. But that notion of going, oh, what's easy, joyful, dynamic, ongoing process that makes me feel engaged with music. It turns out that not doing the streaming, not having interaction with everything, and instead having interaction with 10 things or 20 things or 100 things is vastly better. And for Daoism, that makes total sense. For the Western philosophy and tradition, this makes no sense at all. Or certainly modern consumer society, I would say that makes no sense at all. Another aspect of this, again, that comes in, all these are related and overlapped. And part of the problem of reading Taoism is it's often like, people read this as passivity, and it's not passivity. It's very, very active, but it's active in a different way. And one of the things that it emphasizes is effortlessness, not doing. And when part of not doing is, of course, literally not doing, like, okay, do I really need to eat? Let's not eat and see how that goes. But we call this fasting, and all of a sudden you're doing something again, right? Like now you're on a schedule, and I've got to, now I'm feeling stressed because I'm hungry and I'm not eating, but I'm trying to fulfill this arbitrary out, right? And so you can take this good idea and just wreck it really fast because that's what we're great at. This is sort of the Western and modern consumer mindset. But effortlessness is the notion of do things that are easy, and easy in the sense of like, turns out I have no problem not eating breakfast. So I'm not doing something. I'm not doing something. I'm not spending money on breakfast food. I'm not spending time eating it. And I'm not spending time preparing it. And, everything associated with that has just gone away. But it's gone away through I'm not expending effort to do this. Quite the contrary. I'm saving a lot of time, effort, and energy. And I feel good. And so it's like, oh, well, that's effortless. We'll do things that are effortless. Right? That's one of the great ideas. And the example here, again, a concrete example of that is if you watch children play, they play so hard, so long, and then, of course, they just go thunk on the ground and fall asleep, or they just wear themselves out. And, you're just like, wow. But if you watch them, it is phenomenal how much energy and people comment on that, like, wow, they're so energy. Look at those kids. Well, that's because they're doing what they want. They're doing what's spontaneous. They're not having to work at playing. They're just playing, and they're loving it. And look at them go. That's effortlessness. You look at people at the gym, and they're just like, they're just often, not invariably, but often they just look miserable, and they're grinding it out, and I'm going to get my steps in, or I'm going to get my 20 reps or run my miles or something like this. And it's like, well, is this a joy? Or because it seems like it's very effortful for you. Not like it's effortless, but for some people it is effortless. Like I've mentioned before, my brother, he would get lost and end up in a gym lifting weights. Like he just loved to be in the gym. Like this is where there was no effort for him to go to the gym. Like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to go. Oh, I'm in the gym. Okay, I'm going to lift some weights. It's like me going to the coffee shop. I do say this. I say, oh, I have to go to the coffee shop, which is just wrong-headed thing to say. I've actually caught myself thinking, oh, I'm running late for the coffee shop, which, that's just so wrong because I just want to be at the coffee shop. Like I'm running late to do what I want to do. What does that even mean? Right. But I love to go to the coffee shop. This doesn't bother me. I don't have to work at it. I don't have to think about it. I just go, right? It's just going to happen. It's like, oh, look, coffee shop. Let's go there. Oh, look, coffee shop. Oh, why don't we get a coffee? I'll have some coffee shop, right? All that is just so simple. And so, for me, it just makes me happy and I feel good. But other people are like, oh God, what do you do? You just sit there in the coffee shop? I'm like, oh, precisely. That's the joy of it, right? But think about those things that for you are just spontaneous and effortless. And that is one thing that Taoism really asks you to ponder, reflect on, focus on, consider, because it's, again, all these examples almost always from nature in Taoism is, if you watch a fish swim, it's not it's good at it. It's not thinking about it. It's swimming, right? It's like, oh, look, that fish knows how to swim. Like it's good. I mean, I guess it would, you're like, yeah. So Taoism is like, be like a fish, swim, right? Just this, if you're good at that good thing in the sense of it's effortless for you and easy for you and doesn't cause you stress and anxiety and poison you, go for it. And if it does cause you stress and anxiety and it makes you feel ill, don't do it. So again, you go back to school and you see, I hate to see this. You see school kids sometimes, they just like worn out and beat down and drug out. And it's like, oh my gosh, these are kids. They should all be glowing and happy and dancing about. And yet we've created a system where like, oh, well, how do you know you're doing well in school? Well, you're getting good grades. What an absurd rubric, right? That's a terrible rubric. It's the same thing as, oh, how do you know you're doing good at work? Well, you got promoted. No, you're not doing well because you got promoted. The only way you can be well within the Taoist context is if you're enjoying yourself. It feels life fulfilling, and you're at peace, and you feel joyful, right? Like that. And it doesn't mean, by the way, because there's lots of examples of wheelwrights and butchers and farmers in Taoism, like these are recurrent themes. So it's not that people in Taoism don't work, they don't have jobs, they don't have, it's just that they have jobs that fit them and that they know the context in which they're working in, so that it feels effortless and easy and simple. And it's like, oh yeah, I've got this. We almost, as far as I can tell, and particularly in the American tradition, we view that with suspicion, right? Like if you're good at your job and you seem to be doing it really well, first thing we want to do is promote you to a job you're not good at. This is step one. Oh, we can't have that. Let's promote that person and see if they're still happy. Because if they are, we're going to promote them again. The other thing is we're suspicious of people who seem to be enjoying themselves. Like we're like, oh, you're not supposed to be at work enjoying yourself. You're not supposed to be at work relaxed. You're not supposed to be at work, doing that. You're supposed to be, stressed and struggling and unhappy. That's how you know you're doing it correctly. Like there is this idea that that's how you know you're doing it correctly. And that, by the way, this is pure Calvinism. This is absolutely 100% the tradition of Calvinism, where they say, like quite literally, hello, I think it's Constance Mather who says, your suffering is proof that you're doing God's will. Like that's how you know you're doing God's will, is because you're suffering. I believe that's Prudence Mather. I think so. One of those early American preachers. But you can see it all over the place. This is articulated clearly by all kinds of monastic orders that emphasize suffering and, punishing the flesh and all these kinds of ideas. Taoism is like, well, no. now you've lost your mind. Don't do that. What are you thinking? That's like crazy. What you want to do is do a job that's like sort of wonderful for you, that makes you feel good, that makes you feel uplifted and doesn't stress you out. Or whatever job you're doing, do it in that way and try and find ways to do it in that way. A friend of mine worked at a fast food restaurant, Arby's, I believe, of all absurd things. And he mentioned that the guy that ran their drive-through he loved his job. He loved working there. I think I may have mentioned this in another lecture because, the orders come in, you're doing like 10 things at once. It's just real. It's like a dance. You're like boom, 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 boom. And he just said, he says, I actually find it I love it. I come to work and the time flies by and I get off work and it's great. I used to work at a hardware store and I worked in the receiving and I unload the trucks, sort the boxes out, load the trucks with all the empty stuff and the pallets and all. I had a whole system. And when I worked 3 days a week, when I was in college, it was great. Sometimes I worked 4 days, but usually I worked 3 8-hour shifts a week. And I would ride my bike from college to work my shift, or sometimes at night classes, it would be on my way to school. And honestly, I would have so much stuff to think about with all my classes. And, I would just go in and I could just go. And there was it felt good because I knew how to do it. It was physical, which was great because, so much reading and so much sitting at my desk and writing and all that. And so it just was I didn't bother me at all. Created no ripples in the pond, right? Like just go in, do my thing, work in the receive. And people didn't bother me because I was back, I was kind of hidden back in the bowels of the receiving area. And, just with the few people that were back there working occasionally. And it was just great. Like unload truck, load truck, drive forklift, put prices on some things, move boxes out, and go home or go to the library or wherever I was off to. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's the kind of thing that you want to strive for. But we say like, oh, a good job is one that has, and then we make the list. It's, has high social standing, it pays a lot, it, has career opportunity, you have a better chance for promotion, you have, the whole list of things. But notice that none of the things that are ever on the list, at least that I've ever seen, your mileage may vary. If you can find some, that would be interesting comments that say, oh, you'll be joyful, you'll be healthful. This job will provide you with a sense of inner peace and contentment with the universe. You'll feel bounteous. It will not disturb your other interests or processes. No, this is not like, oh gosh, like that. It's never like, it's so not what we're supposed to be doing or what we're just, even sounds absurd to say this. And so, when I reflect on this, like I said, when the real ostensible trigger was, seeing that survey that 85 to 90% of American adults feel anxiety and stress. And having recently read the Finding Your Way in Daoism book, I was like, oh, here it is, right? What we need is a million Taoists, wise people to wander about going, hey, have you ever thought of not doing that? Have you ever thought that, take a look at your stress, take a look at your anxiety and go, maybe I'm doing it wrong. But what we say is, this is how the world is. I need to find ways to deal with the stress. This is the one that always drives me crazy, which is not entirely wrong, right? Of course, like there's certain wisdom of that. But where you go, oh, I'm going to take in so much poison. I'm going to take in so much anxiety. I'm going to take in so much stress. I need to find ways now to get rid of it. To deal with it. I'm going to do yoga to get rid of the stress that I've just taken in. Or I'm going to go to the gym to get healthy and work off the stress that I've taken. Or you could say, is there any way to like just not take it in? Like, for instance, if you're stressed out by school, just plan to do less well. This is very liberating, right? Just go, trying to get A's is really stressful. Yeah, try to get C's. Maybe that's really easy. Like then you go, oh, look, I like school again because I was stressed about trying to do super well, but don't be stressed about trying to do super well. So just think, well, what if I just take the classes you enjoy and focus on the parts of the subjects you like and ignore or just decide to do poorly on the stuff that you don't like. And then I bet it's a lot more fun. That would be my guess. I mean, I always loved school, so that was just so easy for me in that sense, where it was like, oh yeah, no, I thought this was all fun and games. But the other side of it is I often did stuff that was not asked for, and I often didn't do stuff that was asked for because I'm highly motivated by what I'm interested in and not that motivated by stuff I'm not interested in. So I had this tendency to reinterpret assignments to make them the kinds of things that I would want to do. And then I would just do that and then hope for the best. So most of the time, professors didn't seem to mind. Occasionally, they're like, what in the hell is this? And I'm like, oh, that's the thing I did that seemed adjacent to what you might have been asking for, but okay, I can see what you're saying. So fine, whatever, pay the price. That's cool. That kind of outlook really can be liberatory and can say, hey, no, maybe I do like learning, but I just don't like worrying about these grades. Okay, we'll eliminate grades from the equation and then hey presto. Right? Or maybe, for a lot of people, I think there are many parts of people's jobs that they like more than they're allowed to confess because, of course, we're all supposed to be suffering and striving and grinding. But if you can let go of other parts of it or just do less well, I talk to my students about this at the college. I'm like, how many of you at work, because they're often in, because of the college, often in restaurants or in other kinds of jobs like this, I would say, how many of you are really trying to be conscientious and do a great job. And what this means is that you get stressed out because you're doing a lot of extra work and other people are slacking off. And they're like, oh yeah, a bunch of them raise their hands. And I'm like, right. So try to flip that around. Just say, hey, here's how much I can do that makes me feel good. And I want to do a good job and I feel good about that. But if if I don't do it, why should I do somebody else's job? Let them do their job, and I just won't worry about it. And I've had students who put that into practice, and they say it is hilarious because you realize how much of this drama that you create for yourself. Like people are like, oh, well, of course I didn't do that. You always did that. And they're, yeah, but it's your job. And yeah, but if you're going to do my job, why would I do my job? Like, if you're going to rush over and like, why would I bother? You're taking care of it. And once you stop, they're like, oh, I guess that'll get done. And so this sort of drive to be super conscientious often just becomes this self-fulfilling, stressful issue. Another part of it, they said it reveals how strongly we're motivated to like, oh, I need to be seen to be doing a great job. It's not just do a good job, but I need to be seen to be doing a good job. And part of that is, oh, I need other people to look like they're doing a bad job. So if I do their job faster than them and better than them, then I look good and they look bad. And so by contrast, hey, look at me. Microsoft actually did this for a long time. I don't know if they still do this. For a long time, you were working in a team, but every team was graded like twice a year. And if you were consistently in the bottom percentage of your team, you would get fired. And if you were in the top percentage, you would get promoted. And so, of course, everybody was working against everybody all the time to make them look bad, make me look good. And so the teams weren't productive. They were just, these little self-sabotaging, Survivor Island kinds of dystopic universe. And so people hated working there because you're like, wow, what a horrible, horrible work environment. But even outside of the external pressures like that, we often impose them on ourselves. And hence, then we move away from, quote unquote, the Tao and the way. And then we 85%, 90% feel stressed and anxiety. And it's like, yeah, no, duh. So there's just some anecdotes from and reflection on how Daoism is different and how our outlook and our instinctual response to all kinds of questions can really throw us off because we are trained to think of more, add, compete, drive, all of those kinds of grind, get her done, like all of that rather than peace, relax, joy, health, less, eliminate, stop, effortless, right? That's just, just a totally different outlook. But to return to the beginning, I think it really manifests from this completely different conception of the world. And I kind of feel like if we can remind ourselves, I'm always trying to do this with myself, is to say, life is beautiful and bountiful and joyful and abundant. And if I live in harmony with that, then I'll feel that way. And those things that make me feel that way is what creates the harmony. And that feedback loop of going, oh, this makes me anxious. Why? And maybe I should just stop doing it or not do it or think about it in a different way. Because the feedback, according to the Taoists, is telling you no, because it's not an anxious world. It's a beautiful, harmonious world. That's the concept. And it's just so alien. But if we can imagine we live in a bountiful world and we can imagine we live in a joyful, harmonious world of change and evolution and possibility, that's really I think what underlines the difficulty we have in often reading and understanding the Taoist worldview. It's not the obscure Chinese, although there's that. It's not the tendency to write in paradoxes and all, although there is that. I think it is just basically this. We're told the world is competitive, filled with scarcity, fallen, sinful, and wrong, and we have to do something about all of that. As opposed to saying the world is bountiful, joyful, beautiful, and harmonious, and we don't need to do anything about that, because that's just great. Right? So there it is, a brief reflection, and in some ways simply a monologue to remind myself to remember this, and hopefully it's helpful to you. Thank you very much.